I don't remember.
I'm the fifth one when I go watch it again and when I go to work.
Right, we're live.
Okay. Wherever you want. Make a decision.
Oh, I thought somebody was sitting here.
Yeah, okay. We're going to call the March 13th meeting of the Finance Committee to order. The first we'll go around the table, and we'll start with Mary Ann.
Mary Ann McKee, School Board.
Andy Block, School Board.
Kristen Marcel, School Board. Diana Ravenna, Resident.
Joe Messina, Council Rock Educators Association.
Jennifer Stretch, Tech Support.
Ed Salomon, School Board.
Joe Hidalgo, School Board.
Robert Frazier, Superintendent.
Bill Stone, Director of Business Administration.
Andy Rowe, Transportation Manager for Council Rock.
Denise Brooks, School Board.
And Mark Bialik, School Board, and Mike Thorwart is also here. He's just stepped away just now, and Mr. Tate is away and unavailable on business. Okay, we're going to make a change to the agenda. We're going to move the transportation presentation up because we have a member of the public here for that. And we're going to see if Mr. Rowe wants to go home a little early.
Thank you, appreciate that.
So with that, we're going to have 2 rounds of public comment. After Andy's done, we're going to allow you to have your discussion, and then we'll move on from there.
Thank you, Mr. Bialik. This item is, we're requesting that this be moved forward for action to the March 21st board meeting. We're proposing revisions to the transportation policy. We're approaching crunch time for getting ready for launch for the 1920 school year, both for the transportation department as well as for our families. We need to do some planning around some of the changes that we're proposing here. The timing for the policy changes is right because it coincides with the recent redistricting. However, it's not a result of redistricting that we're proposing these changes. It's just the timing of these 2 things coming together nicely. But we do want to get this approved soon so that Andy and team can get these changes implemented and communicated. I'll briefly summarize three things that we are attempting to accomplish with the policy. Number 1, we're attempting to codify things that are already in practice that haven't necessarily been documented. So that's number 1. Number 2 is we believe that this policy is accommodative for our families regarding some of the things that we have been doing in practice, and we want to continue to do that. And also, you may notice that we've incorporated an administrative regulation along with this policy, which will, in our opinion, allow us more flexibility in the event that we need to make some minor changes to how we're operating. So Mr. Rowe will talk more about some of the particulars of that administrative regulation, but if we see in operation that we're not able to achieve some of the objectives that we've set forth, it's far easier for us to make a change on the fly in administrative regulation rather than in policy. So we hope you would be supportive of that change. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Rowe to run through the changes and the administrative regulation.
All right, thank you, Bill and School Board, for giving me the opportunity to review these policies. So when we talk about the transportation policies, I think it's important that we bring them up to speed and make sure that they're relevant to today's time, day, and expectations. The original policy, from my understanding, was adopted in 1998 and it revised in 2000. So since then, there's been a lot of things that we're doing that haven't been documented. And I think it's appropriate that we do that, moving forward. This is the new format for the Transportation 810 policy and the verbiage that was recommended for us to use for transportation. In this section, in this first section right here, we are recommending that our bus stop locations move from 1 mile for secondary and half mile for elementary to a half mile for all students. The goal of this is to have standardized stops for all of our students so there's less confusion in the neighborhoods and for any student, whether public, non-public, elementary, secondary. With that, I think big growth is the secondary students will be walking a shorter distance, heavier book bags, earlier hours in the morning, very beneficial, and for our drivers and for our sub-drivers out there, easier for them to sub a route, cover a route, and I think overall we'll have better service levels for our community.
Question?
Of course.
I'm sorry. So I know that on the secondary, bus stops were generally tried to be like at entrances of developments and not necessarily go in. But that will change, potentially change that, right?
It would for some developments. Some of the developments may be a dead end or cul-de-sac, and we have all 8 students go out there. But in many cases, the older students are asked to go to the end of the neighborhood, and we would pick from there. That gives, that makes the route more efficient for us, so there's some time savings there. But I think even by reducing the walk distance and going into neighborhoods, we can still accomplish this by monitoring the route, finding new locations for the stops. In some of the neighborhoods, they don't have the best stops. I think the stop was planted there based on need or request, and the demographics in a lot of these areas have changed, and we'll take this opportunity to move these stops and hopefully benefit the majority. In some cases, the stop on the corner that you have right now may not be the best position for the neighborhood, but you live there, so you may have to walk a little bit further. And you know, for us, we just want to do a better job balancing. I've seen a couple neighborhoods of equal size. Some will have 2 stops, some will have 3 stops. Really not fair. We need to just get to the point where we're a little bit more fair and consistent, find that path to enter and exit, and you know, everybody in the neighborhood will know where the stops are, regardless of school. When it comes to walk distances, there was a section in our policy that talked about 1.5 miles for elementary, 2 miles. Since that is a PDE, requirement, we are removing that from the, our board policy right there. That's the section that is crossed out. And then we just talked about the wall distance right there. That the 1 mile for high school, middle school, or secondary will go down to a 1/2 mile for all students in the district. And then for the daycare, we are moving the daycare language to the administrative regulation, which I'll go through next. Also with the ride time, our current policy says 75 minutes within the district and no limit outside the district. That is another item we'll address in the administrative regulation. And then the rest of it is pretty standard, from having the same stops for our non-pub and our public school students. And then when we would have a house stop, it would be on a road that the district or PennDOT would deem hazardous or due to an IEP. There's also language in there that we have existing in our policy today about dead ends and cul-de-sacs. Everybody here is very familiar with that. That's a hot topic. And basically what it says is we will not go down them, but there will be some that we will go down depending on the cul-de-sac or dead end. So if it's a large, wide, easy to turn around, that's something that we would consider. If it's at the end of our district and we would just, bypass it, just to turn around in the next open parking lot, we would consider going in that cul-de-sac to turn the vehicle around, save time, money, and fuel, and head the other direction.
So, Andy, let me ask you a question, all right? And I appreciate the ability to have guidelines where there's an exception where it makes sense. Is that something that you might want to apply to the broader policy rather than just one particular piece of it? I don't know if that creates too much gray area in your opinion, but gives you the right as transportation director to make a call that might be outside the rules because it's the right thing to do by a child versus just a cul-de-sac or a private street.
If I'm understanding your question correctly, specifically about cul-de-sacs and dead ends.
No, I like that he's got the ability to create an exception to one of our rules there within the policy. And my question is, does it make sense to give him the ability to do that within the entire policy when that's right? I know that we come from a culture in the past where we were probably too liberal in doing that and probably inequitable in doing that, or arguably inequitable. So I'm not looking to recreate that, but what I am looking to do is give somebody the right to consider, something from a child perspective, not to have their hands tied by policy.
So I think in particular, the reason that we selected the daycare and the ride time to be included in the administrative regulation initially was that those are the areas that with redistricting, we may need to make adjustments more quickly. But certainly, I think that things could move into the administrative regulation if we want to grant more flexibility, but there's that balance between the certainty of a policy versus the flexibility of an administrative regulation. So it was more of a timing issue that we wanted to shift some of these immediate concerns.
Because I know how important it is to have a policy to be able to back up what Andy does. And at the same time, understanding that every situation doesn't always fit in the box. So, I'm looking for you to be comfortable with your ability to manage through those situations. And make sure this policy gives you the ability to do that.
Yeah, I think it does, and I think that there are always exceptions to the rule, even if that rule is policy. And of course, there are lots of considerations that Andy goes through when handling those requests or when he sees an issue himself. Obviously, what's best for the child comes first and foremost, but you got safety issues and, Andy and I have had umpteen conversations about the size of cul-de-sacs, and we don't want to be backing up that big yellow bus and not quite sure what's back there in terms of vehicles or potentially even a person. So, yeah, I think Andy already has latitude to make exceptions. But again, it's balancing.
Okay, just want to make sure you guys
all
are
those
good.
needs or all those priorities.
Yeah, because that's it's kind of the one place where it's obviously called out that.
You had said 75 minutes, but is it 60 minutes? That was the maximum? I thought you had said 75.
So in the old policy, 810 revised 2008, it was 75 minutes. In the administrative regulation, we're going to propose 55 in district. I think that's a number that we would still like to see lower, but there are some factors on why we got to keep it at 55. Some of the corners and the pockets of our district, for example, Upper Mayfield can be challenging to get to on a Newtown middle school run or high school run. Also, when we make that statement, when our non-public school bus breaks the barrier and there's 4 kids that go to school and they all live in 44 points, we may need to use a lot of that time. Our goal was to keep it as low as possible and use all of the assets that we have out there to keep that down. But
That was my question, Joey. So this is the second part is the administrative regulation.
yes,
And in there, we're actually looking to decrease from 60. We're not looking to increase from 60.
we're going to decrease from 75.
Okay. But I'm just saying up there, we're crossing out 60 minutes is what the current regulated policy shows.
That's a typo on my end.
Okay.
One of my first recommendations was go from 75 to 60. And then after having some further discussions, we took it to 55. So that shouldn't be in there.
That's
It's
fine.
75.
That was my concern. I want to make shorter trips for kids, not longer ones. So that's good.
So building on that point, 55 seems way too much, just hearing 55. Now, that being said, I recognize that you've got rural routes that are out there and
Not just
you want it.
routes with lots
Well,
of stops.
whatever it is, I understand there's traffic, there's different things. So, I appreciate that there's going to be longer, but is there a way for us to be proactive about saying, hey, our target run for an elementary school is X, maybe not for the secondary schools, but to give some direction around how you guys actually build the routes, to challenge us, push those down. Now that could have financial impact. Might very well, no idea. But, I would hate to think that, and I know you're not building those routes 55 minutes, but, best intent, if we're still, on the average is 45 minutes on some of those elementary school buses, that's would still be a concern, at least to me.
Understood. And when I spoke to Bill about it, we were trying to figure out what is the best approach. So I don't feel comfortable putting a number out there and missing it the first year. So the reason why, or one of the reasons why it's in an AR format is I hope to come back next year after redistricting, and we're having some challenges in the driver market, just like everybody else. We have enough equipment to run in 45 minutes. I just need to make sure we have enough drivers and sub-drivers out there to ensure we can hit that number. I can build every route in 45 minutes, but if I don't have 175 drivers, I'll look like a fool the whole year and get a lot of complaints. So ultimately, I feel pretty good about 55. We have a few runs that are closer to 60 on paper, and we'll just have to do some adjustments for those. We're really going to try to push that number down, and with the recent approval of granting the second router, now we'll have 2 people full-time to look at 690 runs. Right now, 1 full-time person looking at 690 runs, and whoever has time in the office to help out. So by having another router focused on it, I feel fairly confident that we will get below 55. How much below 55? I just have to see how first student is staffed up ready to go. And with the new locations of the stops, and we're trying to make that more consistent for the school district, that's going to add time. But I think from the work that I've seen over the last couple of years, we were able to still find efficiencies. So I agree, Andy. I think when you guys get an email or a phone call that your student, or there's a student riding for 55 minutes, the first thing you're thinking, you need to fix that. Yeah, that's a big number for elementary age student. I agree with that. And we're really going to try to get down in the 40s. That's ultimately where I think we can get to. And in some areas, we'll do it quicker than that, just because of the layout and the density of where the students are.
Now, I imagine particular attention you'll be paying to those students coming to the north from the south.
And I've already had a discussion with my team about it. You know, I know there's been many discussions, and I know it's a very difficult time, but we want to make that transition from our transportation as smooth as possible. And in some of these scenarios, I think it's just going to happen naturally, because there are pockets where there's a large population of students, and I can get them in 90 stops, have a full bus, and go right to the school. You know, and not have so many intermediary stops and house stops along the way, which basically drag that bus stop so much longer. One stop, whether it's one kid or 3 kids, it's a minute, minute and a half, to fully stop for the student to get on, safely be seated, you know, get the lights off and keep on moving, get up to speed. Well, we'll go ahead and move into the administrative regulation, daycare transportation policy. We received some calls, some emails, and then, you know, after reviewing this with the leadership team, our recommendation is to provide daycare transportation K-6 to the home boundary and to the adjacent school boundary. I looked at a couple of the numbers out there, because when we were crafting this up, I wanted to understand the impact of, maybe we should look at 2 miles, maybe we should look at 1 mile. The policy prior to this change, the recommended change, it was a 1/4 mile or 1/8 mile. I read it 2 different ways, and we weren't consistent. So we were going a little bit further than that. And then when you add a mile or 2, you might get 1 or 2 daycares in there, and some of these lines are shifting, you know, a large amount, and they may have had some daycare established in this area. So because of that reason, we decided to just use adjacent. And for some of those schools, that opens up a large portion of the map. But the way we're structured, you know, I just explained real quick, is we're running a 3-tier system. The impact in the morning is, I will just put the middle school bus that gets off you know, a little bit earlier. They'll be assigned to picking up the students in those daycares outside of the home area first. Then they'll travel into the home area of that school, pick up those students, and then drop them off at school. Impact financially is only fuel, because I'm already paying for the bus at the high school level to the A.M. Belden Elementary School. On the PM side of it, unfortunately, what we do, we service the home boundary and then we leave. So those students that are going to a daycare outside of their home school area will be dropped off last. And the impact to the district will be both a charge per student for their hourly time and then fuel. So in the morning, it's fuel only, and in the afternoon, it potentially could be fuel and time.
All these daycares are within the district though, right?
Yes, we'll still stick to not transporting students outside the district for daycare. So some of the schools that are right on the boundaries, they'll have to stay in Council Rock.
So just to clarify, so technically someone who's at Wrightstown Elementary could
Yes,
have a daycare trip to Richboro, to Upper Makefield, to Newtown.
yes.
Okay.
So when I did, I think Richboro, another school, touch 5. So those 2 have the majority of the map. There's others that, you know, touch a few, but, you know, at the end of the day, when I'm looking at it, we can do it. You know, it's one of those things that when you choose a daycare outside your home area, it's given that the ride's going to be longer. We're just going to manage that. So we don't want to have long rides and split all the kids going to an outside daycare on one bus. We'll spread it out. So the buses that'll finish early, if there's 2 for that school, we'll put 1 for an outside daycare on one and another on the second bus. So try to be fair about it and do our best to keep the ride time down.
Is that an opt-in system? It's not like where we build a route for a student and the student may or may not take the bus.
Yeah, it would be,
This is an opt-in,
yeah, there would be a daycare request, formal request come through.
and if you find they're not using it a lot, then, okay.
So our drivers are really good about telling us when there's dead stops, whether it's, morning or PM, and then we call the families and we ask them, would you like to be on call? And when you need service, just call us a day in advance and we'll be at your house or your neighborhood stop.
And for some of the bigger daycares, it's actually an efficient stop for them. They pull in and load a half bus.
Exactly.
So they,
Yeah.
so.
When parents leave that daycare?
They can do it anytime. We start taking them, we always tell them wait till the summer, send them into what we're working on the route, and then we get them in. If it's a daycare that we go to already, if they come in mid-year and there's a change with mom or dad's job or whatever it may be, we can usually assign it next day. And what we'll do is we'll communicate that back to the family in the school to make sure that both parties are on the same page and we're able to do that. If it's, let's say it's a relative's house that maybe we don't have an existing stop pool that's in an adjacent area, that's probably closer to 2 days to get established. For a student, they can review it on the run and provide any feedback and move forward from there.
And when we talk about daycare, are we talking about like kindergarten enrichment program, midday too?
Yes. K through 6.
So I have two things. First, comment, I'm really pleased to see you working to get those ride times down. I'm glad about that and appreciating that you continue to do so. And my second question, and parents who have young kids can help me out on this. In the AR, it references a second grader being allowed to accompany a kindergarten or a first grader
Off the bus.
off the bus.
So one of the other sections that is the receiving students portion, and so there's, on paper, it said kindergarten must be received. First student, elementary schools and transportation always said kinder and first. So the practice has been kinder and first, and that is our proposal on the administrative regulation. What we're saying, there are exceptions. We've had families that call and say, my first grader can come home. The corner stop is actually my house, and they know what to do from there. And then we've received a lot of phone calls about, they have an older sibling, can they just walk with them? Do I have to be at the stop? So because we require kinder and first to be received, we just said second grade to 6th grade.
It just seemed young to me, a second grader taking a kindergarten.
So I was invited to a principal's meeting, I think it was in February, and I posed this question, and I used my daughter as an example. So my daughter's in the 3rd grade, and I think the new policy is kinder. She wasn't making it home. 7 houses in the 1st grade, 2nd grade, and I think now, and every kid's different. For my kid, I think 3rd grade is probably the number, but it's a 7-house walk. The bus stop is on the house side, and she can just go on up. And I think I'm good at the 3rd grade. And as we talk to the principals, some of them said, well, we have some 1st graders that can do it, and we have some 4th graders that, it may be a challenge. So we agreed that the past practice of kinder and first has been working, and we've been communicating that to the families. And we could raise it, we could lower it, but ultimately the shared responsibility at the stop. We feel as though that the kinder and first policy that we've been communicating verbally has been working.
It's a question of how much parenting we want to do. And I'm comfortable with this because I don't want to tell parents how to.
Does it create extra liability though if you've got, you're waiving that rule for kinder and first if there's a 2nd grader sibling there? I think that's kind of where you're going.
Yeah.
From a liability perspective, when the student leaves the stop, technically our liability ends, but nevertheless, we're not gonna, we don't want to put students in a position where they're unsafe. So, I mean, if there's situations where we need to accommodate a daycare request so that the kids can both go somewhere where they will be supervised and we don't have to worry about this kinder 2nd age differential, parents have the option to be able to do that too.
So does a parent physically have to say it's okay for that to take place?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Letter.
Oh, for the exception side of it? But we would have communication from the parents saying that they will walk home with their older sibling in the third grade.
We know about it prior to it happening.
Yes, yes.
I've had bus drivers not want to let my second grader off the bus if somebody wasn't there that she recognized. Do they have that discretion?
Not really, but we do have some drivers that will call into my office about a second or third grader that is getting dropped off on a busier road.
Okay.
And, you know, for student safety, if they don't see anybody out there, or if they know that there's usually 2 cars there and there's 0 today, they don't always feel comfortable even releasing a third or fourth grader in some of these areas. So it depends on that. So I would say in the neighborhood stops, where there's a group of kids going out there, I don't hear a lot of those, but on the major roads, they will phone out to us and we will call the families and just confirm.
I think you have some diligent drivers out there that take it into their own hands.
Yeah, as they should.
Is there any process that the drivers, do the drivers work with the schools to identify the children to make sure they know?
Very good question.
Because I know I've heard from drivers like, oh, I thought that child was in whatever grade. And, you know, like, is there a process between the schools and the drivers to ensure that they know which grades?
Historically, prior to us getting new software, I think a lot of times there was some level of communication. We probably could have done a better job altogether. I think in other schools, some of the principals have set it up where they release the students by grade. So the oldest get to go in the back and then the youngest are up front. So you have a basic concept of who the youngest students are. Last year, I was working with TransFinder, and the reason why we have this better software, it has a lot more options for us, but I kept on thinking of the sub-driver scenario. 6 weeks in, they don't know any of the kids that day. So TransFinder is able to pull our reports where our student information system will provide us not only the students' names, mom or the guardian's information, phone numbers, but also their picture. And then we created a custom report for them that all special services students, all kinder and all first grade pictures would be pulled across. There are some challenges with that because when they start kindergarten, they don't have a picture yet. So if they transfer in, they don't have a picture yet. So there are times where we don't have a picture, but it also has a grade next to the name. That helps you a lot. If only one student getting off there, but if it's Newtown Grant and we're dropping off 36, you may not know which one it is. So we're working on that and we're trying to get that information to the drivers earlier. And I always tell first student that please try to develop a relationship with the students and the families out there, become familiar with who's getting off at what stop. We don't have a student tracking system, so if a student got off the stop early, you don't know. So, you know, they have a huge responsibility on the road to be safe, but not only be safe while operating the vehicle, but safe in the sense that the right students are getting off the right stops. But we do have a report. It'll help them, and hopefully, as we add students, we tell them to print it and they have the most accurate information possible.
Andy, just for my own clarification, are all stops on the table to be looked at? Or are you going to keep some things and adjust accordingly? And the reason I'm asking is, and we haven't looked at this in a long time. My suggestion would be that it all should be on the table. You know, some of these developments that we think are safe are cut throughs to larger roads. And in 2008, they might have been a little easier going than they are now. And with that being said, and then we just talked about the kindergarten and second grade, you know, this would be an opportunity to not just look at a possible move of a stop, but maybe taking in consideration the security with that in mind. Maybe moving that stop down the street just a little bit is safer for those kindergarten kids as opposed to keeping the existing stop that hasn't been looked at. So I would highly recommend that everything should be on the table because it's not all working what worked 15 years ago.
Exactly, and that's the scariest thing about this proposal, you know, is when you have to adjust walk distances and look at these neighborhoods. And my goal is not to get to 0.5. My goal is to get lower than that, or I want to put 0.5 up there. You know, I think 0.5 is a number that we can agree that is a max, right? And let's get under that. Let's split these neighborhoods, and to your point, Ed, let's go out to them. Let's view them again. And
fresh eyes.
Yeah, and we already have the feedback, you know, because the parents and the community have told me, also, we can also reach out to the local authorities with the police and just get their feedback too. And, we're gonna feel the heat.
It's huge. This is a huge undertaking. I commend you as
We started off
case.
with,
This is great.
AM and PM each being their own stop. I think when I started, we were around 9,000. We cut that down, just all of these sweetheart stops everywhere. And now, where as I look at some of these neighborhoods, it's not fair, and I look at other neighborhoods, it's perfect. But to your point, we're gonna look at all of them.
Good.
We have all the stop pools that we use for secondary and elementary. We have them saved in 2 different locations. When we left Edgelog, our new software, I pulled all that information in a user-defined field, so I can still access that to see what the student had in the old software system in elementary and secondary. We've been so much better the last couple of years with being consistent. So as I look at the stop list, I look at the different combinations out there, and if there's one that just doesn't match anything else, it shouldn't be there, and then the uncomfortable conversations happen from there.
Right.
I think we're trained, we're ready, it's time to put, like you said, a fresh set of eyes on it.
No, it's great. And it's going to be some growing pains for our parents. I mean, this is going to be a tough fall for a lot of our parents.
There's
And
a
this,
lot going
we're
on.
adding more to their full plate. So, but it's a good thing. I think, let's get it right and do it, the right way that we need to do it.
Will the bus routes be out earlier this year as a result of changes to give people time to deal with them?
So,
He smiles.
Rather than the week before school, surprise, you gotta go down the street.
I hope not, but when Hack opens, Robert and I had this conversation in the past, through transitions in software, when Hack opens, it's there. So I'm not sure what day we have it slated for the upcoming school year, but traditionally it's been between 8:15 and 8:20, I think, when it gets out there.
But even still, I think that it's really going to be important, not only to communicate this new policy, for the people who have daycare issues, to which it's going to be a great thing, but, to spread far and wide, to make it clear that this is an overhaul and just put it on the radar and send the message out a lot that, the bus stop we've had for the last, forever could be changing. And, because I think sometimes even like the bus information could come in and you're not like really trained to look at like, where's my stop? You're just looking at the time. So I think that it would just really help us to have Susan O'Grady like sending that message out several times to underscore that like we're taking a look at this, things are going to change, it's going to be better, we're shortening shortening distances, we're shortening times, we're making it more equitable. So you may see, prep people and say you may see a change.
You'll save yourselves a lot of heartburn phone calls.
Well,
The earlier you get out.
so Andy talked about his sweetheart stops. That's going to cause heartburn for him when they disappear too. So, you're going to get it.
No, I get that, but if you're setting the context so people understand what's coming,
Yeah.
you get them the information earlier if it's possible, then you're at least
You're ahead of the game.
trying to get ahead of what we know is coming. You're going to get somebody last minute. You never told me. it's going to happen.
Or arguably,
They
we're
never
shortening the
noticed.
window of time to allow that to even happen, so.
I mean, you bring up a good point. I took a couple of phone calls this year about they glanced at the time on the bus and Andy Ness, like they didn't realize their stop moves. It was a difference between being inside the neighborhood and at the intersection of a road, but everything else is the same because the driver who bids on it every single year. She loves doing that part of town. The bus number was the same, the time was the same, and one part of the intersection was the same. And we picked up probably 0 students that day.
Well, that happened with my kids, that's why I'm saying it. That happened years ago, where it actually was a better stop. Because we were on a busy road and it moved it in just a little bit. And then we're like, well, where did the bus go? So,
That's good. I'll take that back to the team and, work on a communication plan to make sure that they are prepared as we finalize the transportation policies, what to expect, what is the impact, what is the potential impact.
And we can start now. Robert can start soon. I guess now is not the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. So are we comfortable with this making its way on the agenda next Thursday?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, you done? Good job. Anything else? Yeah, great presentation.
Thank you.
Did you want to have a public comment for Andy? Dismissed?
Sure. So my name's Diana Ravenna. I live in the College Park neighborhood, and before we're getting redistricted to Wrightstown. But my son goes to the Malvern School of Truro. He's been there since he was 12 weeks old. And after looking at all of our options, we want to have him continue being in a kindergarten enrichment program with them. So I just came today to just, communicate the need to, have Malvern School be a bus stop for Wrightstown for kindergarten. Yeah, but now you're talking about the timing of the bus, the bus route. Having a 5-year-old be on an almost hour bus ride has me a little afraid, but.
And I can understand your concerns, but when we say that's the max, we want to avoid that number altogether. And, we're going to always do our best to compress that time. And with this transition that we're going through, we're going to look at it a little bit more closely. We, added some assets this year to, take care of a transition that we had going on with Wrightstown and Richboro Middle. What it did show me is that we could squeeze it down even more, find available buses, and, please, when you see that number, call our department if you have concerns about it, and as things start leveling out when the school year starts, we usually see better times. The first couple, it's fresh, it's new, and then in some areas, people start going on call and not using our services on some of these house stops, and then we just start removing stops. And then after a few weeks, that's probably what it's going to be. And hopefully we're at a time that is acceptable.
Yeah, because I did call last week and I was told that Malvern, there was a good chance it was going to happen.
Yes.
And obviously tonight you solidified that, but that, that likely it would be the first stop, Malvern.
Likely.
It would likely be the first stop on the bus route.
Oh, on the way in?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
I just had a quick question. The forms that the parents, I fill them out too, but so the parents, fill out the form and they send it in. Is it helpful to get them in earlier so that some of that work can occur so that you can get that information out to the parents earlier? Like, is it possible to request them by a certain date, or is that something that's not helpful?
So we're getting them right now, and we haven't rolled it over in our system to create the new database. That's going to occur probably in early April, and then we'll start putting the information in. So does it help? It doesn't hurt, because what's going to happen is we'll be focused on prepping that database, and then we quickly move into ESY, and we have to get that 5-week launch together using 2025 vehicles for that plus monitors, and then we go back to the school year. So for me, the more information I have before July 4th just helps me, because that's when we're really getting into the big bus routes, the public school routes, and understanding how we can break these stops up and make the runs most efficient. But let me go back to my team on that, Kristen, and see.
Like maybe
what a good
student
idea.
raise communicating,
Include that
try to,
communication, yes.
I don't know, it's just a thought. I sometimes am one of those last minute parents, and so I was just
Well,
thinking.
I think the deadline is when it's coming, so if we don't change the deadline,
Yeah.
you can ask for it early all you want, but the deadline's when it's coming, so you might as well.
You're still gonna get some people who, for whatever reason, aren't even gonna know, so you can't get it finalized, but getting more information earlier.
And a lot of times, there's not much impact to it because they're going to a daycare that we're already transferring to. So some of those last minute ones, unless it's a family member that's outside of your sending area, might have to stop or be close to it, route the bus that way.
Okay. We're good to move on?
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you to the committee for accommodating a semi-finance related item.
Okay, we're going to move on to the budget presentation, first draft.
Jenny, you good?
I think we are.
All right. Good evening, everyone. So this is our first draft of the 2019-2020 budget. We're going to walk you through a couple things tonight. Dr. Frazier is going to give you an executive summary of the budget, which maybe is something that you haven't seen yet, but he's going to give you his flavor of what his priorities are in the budget, what the district is looking to accomplish through through this appropriation. And then I will lead you through the details of both the revenue and the expenditure side of the budget.
All right, thank you, Bill. So this is really sort of just our top priorities and some of the more salient items that some of them keep us where we're at and some of them enhance who we are. So we try to prioritize accordingly and work these priorities into the budget. So the first thing that we would always start with is our top priority, and that is safety and security. So we do have a number of security enhancements in the budget for the 2019-20 school year. We have some security software upgrades as part of that. We have an internal personal notification system. As we went through the ALICE training with our staff, that was part of the group thinking and the feedback that we got from staff is just how we can enhance the timeliness and clarity and effectiveness of that communication. And then our ongoing camera maintenance would be another piece of that. Importantly, getting to the educational side, we're maintaining everything that's currently in place. So we have a couple additions that I'll talk about, but we certainly do not have any reductions or any cuts from a programming standpoint. Obviously, we're always looking to be as efficient as what we possibly can, but certainly maintaining the existing programming. One of the pieces, and the board is well aware of this, and this is a good problem, this is a good increase to the budget, is that our teacher substitute fuel rates are up dramatically, and therefore the costs associated with that are up dramatically. So year to date, last year, we were at a 62.2% fuel rate.
Which is abysmal.
Which is absolutely abysmal. And year to date this year, we are at 90.8. So again, it's a good problem to have. Yes, it costs money, but it's good money because it's good for our students and it's also good for our teachers. And
so I'm going to toss this out here now because I think it's relevant here too. I love this because it talks about the investments we're making. We've never spent time talking about investments. We've always talked about efficiencies, but I think it's worthwhile in your executive summary as we move through the process to talk about some of the efficiencies that you're finding. What are the offsets? What are the things that we're cutting out of the budget? But specific to this one, when we look at what the absentee rates are, if that's the right term, that drive some of these costs. I know we've talked about those in the past, but if we're managing those down to the extent that we can, we're actually saving money versus having to spend incremental money against that. So
yeah, and I can address that without having any hard data with me, or our teacher absence data in terms of sick days and personal days and that sort of thing is pretty much baseline from last year. It's flat from last year. What we have this year, though, are a greater number of teacher professional development days where we're pulling teachers out of the classroom, thus needing the backfill. So our overall sub-need has actually been higher year to date this year than what it was last year, which makes that number even more impressive. The overall absence rate, an actual absence is effectively the same as what it was last year. And
Robert, is that still hovering around, what was it, 10% or?
I would have to look, I don't know.
I remember I was talking about that it was kind of average for education, but I think the number we talked about surprised all of us with our private sector lens on. So my point is here because, always looking to save. I don't mind spending that money because it's better for kids. Right. It's good for staff development, but at the same time, the gap that creates the need for that spend, if there's a way to address that to save on both ends, that'd be a good thing.
And because I addressed it rather aggressively the last time.
Yep.
This topic came up a couple years ago, and I don't want to do that again.
No, I remember.
But out of fairness for my public education comrades, there is a rather significant difference between having PTO days as a private person and the education sector, and the ability when you need that furnace worked on or whatnot, that I can just work from home. Classroom teacher doesn't have that option, obviously. So leave it at that. Supervisor of special education position, I first brought that up several months ago, and that is a position that we cut as we were preparing the 2016-17 budget, and we have felt a very significant impact from that. And so I have been chomping at the bit for the past couple of years to get that particular position back into the budget, and as we sit here this evening, it is. We also have been piloting a new K-6 math program, continue to do that. No final decision is made, but we will have a new core comprehensive elementary math program to start next year. And then excitedly, we're moving into year 3 of our technology plan. Of course, we achieved 2-to-1 Chromebook to teacher ratio last year at the elementary level, 2 tech specialists. This year, the same thing at the middle level. So we budgeted appropriately and accordingly for us to expand that same model to the high school next year. From a tech specialist standpoint, we are in the budget that we're showing tonight, keeping that number flat. So that means that we'll add 2 at the high school, keep the 2 at the middle school, and at this point, at least not be able to keep the 2 at the elementary level. So just so you have a sense of that.
Is that going to be a big deal? Because, you know, to me, I'm going to be pushing you to find efficiencies, but at the same time, you know, when you talk about technology investments, you know, I know we push you to put the incremental 2 in last year. I challenge us to look at the trade-offs of what we're doing so we don't have to take those out. That's just where I sit today.
Right.
Yeah, you've got, you've got lots of help.
And I agree, but I'll go back to when I interviewed for this position and when I interviewed in a very public manner over in the auditorium itself, that, you know, I'm an educator and that's what I think about, and all roads lead to the classroom, and that's what's most important. And yet I will watch every single dollar that we spend in the school district because that's my fiscal steward's responsibility. So, I mean, we all juggle with it. I juggle with it, Bill juggles with it. As the board, you all juggle with it. It's something that we are very, very desirable to include.
So I would just ask, you know, I think tonight's you're getting gut reaction. So I think tonight is to take that feedback and then to go back and say, okay, I heard this feedback, I heard that feedback. But you know, and you guys continue to hone your process, knowing that this is something we're interested in. Mm-hmm. You know, we're going to defer to your expertise and your trade-offs, but at the same time, I think we're saying, hey, let's see what it is you're foregoing or why you're foregoing this to get something else. It's like the whole full day kindergarten, you know, discussion. Hey, love to have it, can't do it. Right. These things are better if we're going to make choices.
Exactly. So exactly. Begin systemic learning management LMS system at the secondary level. That will be a multi-year roll-in, but we have been waiting to do this for several years now. We have Canvas in place in spots, and we have Google Classroom, which I don't consider to be a robust LMS, in place in other spots. And so we'll be looking to become consistent over the next 2 to 3 years and have that process begin next year at both the high school level and the middle school level. We are, if you recall, adding a high school multicultural literature class, which would be a wonderful addition, elected addition, English curriculum, and Time Clock Plus, our timekeeping system. As you all know, we're piloting that right now with our maintenance staff, and so that addition to the budget is in there as well from an operational standpoint. So those are some of the bigger highlights and bigger priorities.
Is that an overall saver though?
It's to be determined. Yeah. We certainly believe that automating some of the payroll process is going to free up some time in my office. There is a rather robust change to the pension law coming into play starting July 1st, which will put new employees into a hybrid pension system, which means there is a defined contribution element to that plan, which I have to see whether that needing to get money out the door so that it lands in people's 401k has to happen timely. And so we need to see what the trade-off is between lost time on one side.
And again, the only reason for the question is I think it's really important. You know, they don't see a lot of this. All they might see at the end is if there ends up being a tax increase, is a tax increase want to, you know, pull out for them as we go through this process and as we finalize it, where are the efficiencies coming from, where are you guys working hard to, you know, to squish, you know, where are the trade-offs?
I see the time clock as also giving us information as how we're using our people.
Yeah.
Maybe we're not using them efficiently.
Yeah.
And we could perhaps, and that's not, it's not to catch cheaters. It's are we using our people correctly, and how do we do that in a fair manner for everyone. So,
And it's legal compliance.
and there's legal.
I mean-
too. Yeah.
Federal labor standard.
Excellent.
Okay.
And my understanding is saying, do we handle our own payroll? Here?
Yes.
Is that normal, a district this size? Yeah. That's surprising. Okay.
Right. So if you can't see like me,
Before you move on, can I ask a question? So can you tell me, Robert, can you go back to that? What did you omit from here? What did you want to be on there that you could not include, or you felt could not be included?
included in the budget or included in the slide?
No, the budget. Because I understand you said this slide represents some of the things that we put into the budget that are important to us, that we wanted to make sure we had. Right.
Well, it's not to play off of what we were just talking about, but I think the first group would probably be the two elementary.
The two what?
The two elementary tech integration specialists.
Okay.
I mean, they are wildly effective, wildly popular. The change in pedagogical practice that we're seeing in the classroom has been profound, like, truly profound. Hannah Preston and Danielle Udis have done a phenomenal job. So it's a tough gift, you know, it really is.
If,
It is what special kids.
if you haven't seen it, get an invite and see them in action. It's really worth, it's really worth seeing.
And they're phenomenal, whether they're modeling a lesson, co-teaching a lesson, just being a critical friend, observing, and then meeting with them afterwards, just as much as they are standing in front of a room and delivering a professional development session to 30 or 45 of their peers, just genuine teacher leaders. It's really good to see.
Thank you.
Okay, so if you need to refer to your book in order to be able to see this like I do, that's page F2. But this is our 1920 budget summary, the highest level summary of both the revenue and expenditure side of the budget. So this chart, in my opinion, does two things. Number one, you see the first draft of our budget here in this column. But you also can see a historical perspective going back 2 fiscal years, which we finished, 2 full fiscal years, plus what's in the budget for the 2018-19 school year, the year that we're living within now. So we're looking at revenues projected to be $242.4 million. Total expenditures, $249.2, which yields a deficit of $6.8 million. The recent goal in budgeting here in Council Rock is to take that $6.8 million number and get it to about a $4 million budget deficit, which essentially is less revenue, more expenditures, and the difference is made up by using our fund balance or our reserve account. The intention with that practice is that there's enough conservative budgeting in the budget process where we see about a 1% surplus on the revenue side of the budget and a 1% surplus on the expenditure side of the budget to offset any use of reserves, because certainly our picture changes dramatically if we end up having to use reserves, because that's one-time revenue that has to be recouped in the next year, and it's a far more significant gap. The other item is that we want to try to continue transferring money into the capital reserve account to fund what we call our summer projects. So that's not in the budget, hasn't historically been in the budget, but through that conservative budgeting process, it's something that we're able to do during the year to be able to keep those deferred maintenance projects from piling up too much. So that's an important priority. So if you look at this number, the $6.8 million deficit, our goal in the budget process is to get it to $4 million, which means there's at least $2.8 million of adjustments that need to be made in this budget. So I say adjustments because that can be a combination of revenue adjustments or the expenditure reductions. So remember, two sides of the budget.
So Bill, just following that logic, which is exactly what we've done, we've got a $4.1 million budgeted use of fund balance this year.
This year, correct.
Where are we forecasting? Historically, we've done that, and then as you can see coming across the line, that's where the conservatism comes in. And typically, we finish either favorable or right at. So where are we currently tracking? Do you have a sense for that yet?
Yeah, so I'm relying a lot on Mr. Reinhardt and where his gut is on the budget. And his belief is that we're tight this year, so that we, as you can see last year with that, if we did a $3 million transfer in 2017-18. So essentially we finished flat.
We dipped in the fund, yeah, we dipped in the fund balance.
And only by, $300,000, which for a $249 million budget is a pretty small number.
Yep.
However, I'm going to dig more into numbers to see where we land, but I'm hopeful that our trend is that we continue to hit that 1% surplus on both sides of the budget, and that we come out basically flat. If we want to continue to transfer that $3 million into capital, that's essentially, we need another 0.5% on both sides of the budget in order to come out on top. So 2 million basically for revenue, 2 million on expense, plus another 1.5 million on either side to make up that 3. Well,
So just so you know, just so you're ready to expect this, one of the questions that I ask as we move through this, because it's important to determine how we feel about the next year's forecast, is how we track on actuals.
So I would like to take that opportunity then to tell you that for the sake of consistency, following what Bob has done.
Yeah.
But that is a very important concept that I intend to incorporate into upcoming budgets.
Bob would usually be conservative with the tax revenue projections, and I see up there, so he basically helped you with the local sources there for this first draft?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, he was an integral part of putting this budget together. I was an observer more than I was a doer. All right, so on the revenue side of the budget, the revenue budget is increasing $5.8 million in total. The increase is in local revenue, $4.8 million, and then $1 million in state revenue. No change to federal revenue. This budget assumes a 2.3% real estate tax increase, which would be going right to the Act 1 index. I'm going to take you through the calculation of real estate tax revenue on the next slide because it is significant. I want to spend a little bit more time on there, but I'll take you through the changes on the revenue side of the budget.
How's that tie back to the -9% on state sources on the last slide that you showed?
Can I explain?
Okay,
that now?
sorry.
Yep, that's okay. So, all right here where it says net of gambling funds. The state is required to certify our gambling funds to us. So that's all the money that is used for homestead, farmstead, and credit on tax bills. It's not certified until May 1st. So as a practice, we take it out of state revenue and put it into local revenue, because if the state didn't certify that there were funds
Just in a
available,
different bucket.
we wouldn't have it.
Got it.
Right. So that would be unfortunate if that happened, because then it would look as though there was a massive tax increase. Because that $200 or so would just disappear. So that $4.3 million is the net number of gambling funds. If you look in your budget book at the revenue summary, you'll see that local real estate taxes are growing by probably close to $10 million, but that's because it's including about $5.5 million of state funds, which when certified, come out of local and go down into state.
Good to know.
We are observing a trend in the occupation assessment tax. It's trending just a little bit downwards, so we made a slight adjustment to that line item by $100,000. And our interest earnings, as I mentioned at the last board meeting, are tracking very well, and so we were comfortable making a $500,000 increase to that line item. State revenue, I'll go into some details about what Governor Wolf proposed in his budget earlier in February. But we have a rather conservative number in for an increase to the basic ed subsidy of $100,000, which is offset by a decrease that we believe could come through on the transportation subsidy. And the reason that happens is the state has been level funding that amount of money on a statewide basis, when there should actually be adjustments for cost of living, for lack of a better term. So because of calculation in the state subsidy formula, we actually believe we might see a decrease. It's based on the market value of property in the district. It's the very first calculation that happens. And if your market value increases, which is the value of property in the district, then your transportation subsidy actually declines. So without additional dollars to help offset that, our transportation subsidy would decline, and we want to be conservative on that estimate. Social Security and PUSERS reimbursements, as I'm sure you're all aware, we get 50 cents back on every dollar spent for Social Security and retirement contributions into the systems. So on the expenditure side, you'll see increases of the expense offset by increases in revenue. All right, so again, this is page F4 of your budget book. You don't see on that page, however, the comparison. So this column right here is the 2019-2020 calculation. This column right here is 2018-19, just for comparison's sake. So this number here is 2/3 of our total revenue. So it's significant. We should spend some time talking through how it's calculated. First step is the assessed value of all property in the district. It's just under $1.3 billion. It's up about $6.5 million year over year. So what that means is that if the tax rate stayed flat, we would get $800,000 of additional revenue just for having the same tax rate because the value of property is increased. The next step is to remove what are known as the Act 153 properties. These are properties that are grandfathered under a state law that allows, because of the preservation of open space, their assessments are frozen at a point in time, and they don't pay tax on any increase over and above that. So we have to make a negative adjustment to our assessed value, which happens right there. Our collection rate, we're still tracking very similarly, 97.2. That's a good collection number. Obviously, we hope to exceed that. That's one of the areas where we hope some conservatism can come in if our revenues come in a little higher than that. That's obviously significant. When you multiply these two numbers together, you get the value of 1 mil. So the mil is basically our rate. So this basically means that 1 mil gives us $1.25 million of revenue this year, compared to 1.251 last year. The proposed millage rate is set to increase in this proposal 2.84 mils, which is a 2.3% increase. So this is our tax rate for the current year, multiply it by 2.3%, and then add the 2.84 mils. So the proposed rate is 126.45 next year. So then you multiply mils times millage rate, and you get your $159 million. Now, to your point, here's that almost $5.5 million of gaming funds that is just a shift. We take it out of local, move it to state, and we'll do that once that happens. So that obviously looks like a significant increase, but remember, we hope that $5.5 million is released out. I will reiterate that despite the board's approval to apply for referendum exceptions, this budget does not include those referendum exceptions. And that's about another $1 million revenue should that election be. Any questions so far? All right, I will speak quickly on the state budget that Governor Wolf put forth on February 5th. So these are statewide dollar increases that are divvied up amongst all school districts. $200 million for our basic ed subsidy, $50 million for special ed subsidy, and the Ready to Learn block grant, which historically has been a separate line item, was rolled into the basic ed funding formula. Dollars-wise, that doesn't make a difference to us, but if it meant that we might not have to follow some of the restrictions around Ready to Learn, that could be beneficial to us. I'm not optimistic that the state is going to release any restrictions on how we use those funds, but they did transfer the money out. So you would see, if we incorporated this, you'd see a line item go to zero and a more significant increase in basic ed funding.
What kind of movement, if any, do you see actually coming against basic education funding formula now that that conversation seems to have started again in Harrisburg?
I think it's too early to tell at this point.
Because that becomes problematic for us, if I remember correctly. And actually, the editorial in the paper was pretty wrong based on my recollection of the numbers that Petrie showed me.
Right.
We stood to lose significantly.
Yeah, but definitely
rather than
detrimental.
being even.
I was going to ask, and I'll chime in here, that $200 million increase, I mean, you have TBD, but traditionally, those increases don't show up in Council Rock.
So let me speak to that for a moment. The reason it says TBD is because there's, in the new funding formula, there's lots of data points. So sparsity size, so how big you are, how geographically how big you are versus how small the number of students you have. Poverty index, income. So the data points that were used to inform the initial calculation are not going to be the data points that generate our final subsidy number. So right now, we stand under basic ed and special ed about $200,000. So I can't tell you how much that's going to wiggle, but I'm not, and I also can't tell you whether $200 million is going to stick.
That's true.
Because the state hasn't.
What are we, a few million above hold harmless or a million in high change?
It's a good question that I don't know the answer to.
Because we have seen increases. It's what, 3-4 years since they implemented that?
The interesting component of the new funding formula is that districts, because of the way that it's, the new money is divvied up, it is possible that districts can lose money. So even go below their whole harmless because of the way the formula is driving out the share of dollars. So it's just one of those unique little flaws in the formula that I'm just not comfortable putting in the entire amount of the.
So that's one of those things that we'll see as it.
Yes. Hopefully
Maybe even after we vote on the budget.
I would bet money that it will be after we vote on the budget. Just two other proposals of note that Governor Wolf put forward amongst many others. This is a budget for him, is also a policy exercise. He proposed statewide minimum teacher salaries, which would not have an impact here, $45,000. And they're continuing the school safety and security grant. So we were awarded $25,000 this year to be able to do some upgrades. And that program is going to continue. It's hopeful that there's either more money that comes in or a little bit less restrictions, because if you recall, there were two parts to the grant. Everybody who applied got 25 grand, and then the rest is competitive. I hope that the state is seeing that a competitive grant around school safety is maybe not the best way to drive up dollars. So we would be hopeful that we might see some more dollars out. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about the expenditure side of the budget. So this is a one level down on expenditures, showing it a little bit differently than what you see in the budget book. So this is going by what we call our object codes. Your budget book is organized by function codes and then objects beneath it. But this is really to show you the impact of salaries and benefits on our total budget. So it is 76% of our total budget for 2019-20. We're a people organization. This is not a surprising number to anybody sitting around the table, but it is, when we talk about our budget, it is really salaries and benefits that has a significant impact. Our expenditures are right now budgeted to increase about $8.5 million. 4.6 of that is in salary. So a few comments on salary. This includes contractual salary increases. It does not include any retirements at this time. So there's generally some savings when a teacher who is presumably at the top of the salary schedule retires and is replaced by somebody who is closer to the bottom. There's generally about a $50,000 swing to decrease expenditures. We don't have any of those built in yet because that's something that is typically comes through much later in the budget process. As we become aware of retirements, we can begin to incorporate those, and for context, 20 retirements would translate into about $1 million of expenditure reductions.
So I'm sure you'll get into the detail around the 8 additional heads. What's the salary increase without those?
So here's what I'm going to share with you about the positions. It appears as though there are some additional positions that, remember, this was final budget 2018-19, yep. So May. So it appears to me that there were some positions that needed to be added in the CRESPA group after the budget was approved. So that could be in the special ed area, instructional aides. There are, so the 7.87 is not necessarily an increase over last year. And I'm going to allow myself the opportunity to get into more detail at our April discussion on staffing, because I do need to get with with Christine and.
Yeah, well, because
make sure I really dig in and
we'll be
understand where-
scrutinized there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Headcount changes over time.
Absolutely. So, I mean, Dr. Frazier mentioned a few of the positions that are included, tech specialists being the significant among them. There's 1.2 in for English language. So we're seeing some change in that population. There's a 0.2 for math, and there are 2 positions budgeted at the elementary level, just in case we have enrollment and we need the pop section to accommodate lessons.
And again, even the 4 tech specialists, even though that number's staying flat, that 4.0 is built into that number as well. So it truly is an increase of what you're seeing there.
Okay, so quickly on the employee benefits side, one of the items that we're pleased to see helping the expenditure budget is our healthcare. Our experience and some recent changes in plan design are really helping to drive down costs. And this is now, we're looking at another year, 2017-18, we finished with very good experience. We're looking at similar experience in 2018-19. So our projection for 2019-20 on healthcare is actually a decrease of almost $1.1 million, which is similar to what I've heard counterparts in other school districts share, but it is recently it's a rather unusual trend. Most of the time we see healthcare going up. So this is a fortunate trend that we hope can continue. I mentioned Social Security and retirement. Those 2 items right there. That's about $2.1 million of increase. And obviously the reason on retirement, you're seeing 2 parts. One, the rate is increasing from 33.43% to 34.29%. So even if salaries stay flat, we would see about an $800,000 increase there. But obviously with contractual salary increases, then that compounds on. I'll go into more details on the 300 to 900 objects on the next slide. So you can see it's about $59 million increase in about 60. Okay, so highest level of, when I look through the budget, I looked for what the big increase across the objects, across the functions. One of the items, as Dr. Frazier alluded to, was contracted substitutes. So we're looking at a budget increase of about $232,000. Again, it's a good problem to have because we have teachers in classrooms when there are kids there.
So that's just the increase, that is just the function of more teachers in classrooms versus any overhead costs of using the service and all that kind of stuff.
There's a contractual rate increase.
Yes, it is, okay.
It's also fill rate.
But it's primarily just better fill rates.
The vast majority is fill rates.
We have some funds allocated in what we call district-wide regular instruction, F43. This is the K-5 math program. It's currently under review right now. The team is piloting 2 different programs and evaluating which program to recommend to academic standards in May. So you'll get more information about that. So what's included in that, this is actually a net increase. So there's each year there's different curriculum that might be reviewed. And so there's some decreases in certain areas offset by increases in this math area. So the expenditure budgeted for math is about $900,000, but you see some reductions in other the curriculums that were reviewed last year. I believe it was social studies. Science. One of those.
Yes.
So that's going to be books, consumable supplies, and any manipulatives that kids might need as part of math. Buildings and grounds, two rather large increases there. One is custodial services, so that's our Aramark contract for custodial services. Part of that is that there was a oversight in the budget that we actually didn't budget for any custodial services at Hillcrest, but we're obviously providing them. So that is not the full increase of the rate. It's just the catch up that we'll have to find somewhere else in this year's budget. And then the general supplies. So these were the initial requests that came through from the maintenance department. Obviously get scrutinized through the budget process, but it does include, this would be the area where you see some of the, where you would see the safety and security supply upgrades that Dr. Frazier mentioned. Contracted transportation, again, this is another net number, increase of $191,000. So that's the increase on the first student contract, net of any efficiencies that we can find as part of routing that transportation process. And lastly, the technology budget, that's increasing about $1.1 million in a couple of areas. One, contracted services. So these are areas where our staff, we need to consult with outside organizations because we don't have the capacity on our own staff to perform the work. Communications, we need to make some equipment upgrades for our cable channel, which hasn't been done, as I'm told, in 11 years, so we need to make some upgrades there.
We call Nancy.
Sorry,
I said somebody's got to call Nancy.
Yes. We also have in the budget this year deferred maintenance project to replace phones and phone switches. So phones at 3 schools and phone switches, the control behind the scenes for 10 of the schools. Software, that increase is related to Time Clock Plus. So this is inclusive of any hardware that we might need to buy. So again, that's part of our rollout process. We are piloting using tablets, which are less costly than the actual time clock sold by the vendor. So if our pilot is successful, we hope that we can decrease some of the hardware costs around that, but again, we need to make sure that functionality is good. And lastly, equipment, Dr. Fraser mentioned the increase in the number of devices for the high school level to finish out year 3 of our tech plan. So that's that increase there.
And it goes without saying, but just in case you're not making the connection, 4 grades at the high school level, 2 grades at the middle school level. So to build in that figure.
Can I ask about the cable TV? Do we have a way to track how many people are actually watching cable channel and what we're spending on the cable as compared? I think communications are obviously important, but everything's on YouTube. Everybody watches everything on video somewhere. I'm curious what that really costs to maintain that channel, right? I don't know.
Yeah, we can certainly make a point of analysis, of course, that you should.
Okay, so next steps, we obviously need to take a hard look at the 300 to 900 objects to make sure that the budget requests match up with our administrative priorities. So that's the next several months of work in my office and the cabinet team. We'll also begin looking at refining some of the budget assumptions. So we talked about local revenues, we talked about some of the variable expenditure categories. So for example, we'll look at historical trends on utility spending to see if maybe there's some adjustments that can be made and things like that where it's not a fixed cost around a quote for supply, but it's something a little bit more variable where we need to analyze data to come up with our assumption. I mentioned pre retirement, so as those come in, we will evaluate and
Do we have a hard deadline for those? I mean,
For the retirements?
Yeah.
There's a couple threshold dates, but not a hard deadline, no. It's comprehensive.
That's true.
True, you can retire anytime you want.
We talked about at some point
Right.
making it such that we could actually run a budget around it. So I didn't know if it made it into the last contract.
We will take a deep dive at the April Finance Committee meeting around staffing, so you'll see in far more detail broken out by bargaining unit, what some of the changes were on the staffing profile this year compared to next year. And then I mentioned here committed fund balance. As you're all aware, we have money committed in our reserves for future educational initiatives. And from my perspective, the implementation of the math program, because it is a non-recurring cost, it's not people. It could be a candidate to use committed fund balance. But again, we need to evaluate that in a broader picture around our overall budget and where we think our current year expenses are going to land versus.
As could equipment or anything else, any other one time.
So we're going to make that evaluation as we go through the process.
And that's an educational priorities.
Yes, we agree.
So the use of fund balance gives you wiggle room through the year, but we don't have any significant grants that we know we're getting that we're planning against here. Have you already taken those into consideration against some of the costs you saw up there, like security and some of the other things?
Yeah, no, we've already gone after what we can go after. We're waiting on one grant right now.
But you factored it into this?
Well, really.
So if you've got incremental security
Yeah,
Yes.
the grants that we've gone for, we got the 25,000 automatic one, we got a $20,000 competitive one. We're waiting to hear on the 45,000 one. We're not real optimistic.
And they're not.
So that's not bad.
So the big one though, my question is, have you made any assumptions around MBIT? Capital expenditures that we could get hung with? I know the process you're going through, and, you know, I'll defer to you guys, especially now that you're taking that over, as to would it be prudent to do that? And that's probably, could be a committed fund balance, because I don't, depends on how that process evolves, but I think we got to keep that on the radar so it doesn't surprise us. And hopefully that's part of the long-term capital plan. Okay, perfect.
Certainly.
Awesome. Spectacular.
Okay, the last slide I have for you is our timeline. So check the box on March 13th. We're finished going through that. My presentation, at least. We'll take questions after. We have our staffing review to happen in April. And then we launch right into the Act 1 formalities around the budget process. So we'll hold our budget forum before the board meeting on the 25th. We'll ask for approval of what's known as the proposed final budget at that meeting, at that board meeting. We'll do a final budget update for you at our May 9th committee meeting, and then ask for approval at the newly rescheduled May 30th board meeting, which, again, we need at least 30 days between that meeting, where we do the proposed final budget, and the final budget in order to comply with the Act 1 timeline. Because of the way Thursdays fell this year, May got pushed up. We needed to have that.
So remind me, just, I know this was the first year we applied for exceptions, and I don't see it up there, but in years past, we've had a procedural approval of a preliminary budget. We don't have to do this year because we did the exceptions, or do we have to indeed do a preliminary budget? And is that the proposed final budget?
The board approved the preliminary budget already.
Right, so that was part of the exceptions process. Okay. Just wanted
Yes,
to make
yep, and then I applied, there's a deadline in here, an internal deadline to apply for the exceptions, we met that. But now we're in the,
Got it.
Everybody does the same thing from here on.
Do we know who's not available on the 30th yet?
We
Just
do,
two?
well, yeah.
Well, it's
one
45
short,
days out.
And
so
then one
that's-
maybe,
Yeah.
yeah.
And maybe might be available for calling, but we'll have our,
Yes.
well, we need, is it just a regular majority that we need for this, for budget?
It is.
Okay. Any questions?
Comment, first time up, great job,
Yeah. Really.
Excellent.
great job.
Maybe I should have set the bar a little low.
Very thorough, very well done. I think it's easy to understand. Right?
No, you did fine. Yeah.
did a fine job. Just
Of
one question?
course.
Building usage fees, field usage fees, where does that get funneled?
That is in the revenue budget, which,
Okay.
if you,
I apologize if I missed it.
it was not on the
Buried.
screen.
It's buried.
It's not buried.
You will
Well, I
see
mean,
it,
just, yeah,
page
just line.
F3. There's a line item on revenue from community services. So that line item, in addition to building usage fees, is also going to include use of an auditorium, things of that nature. So it's not, kind of encompasses all the revenue that we generate from community groups and outside organizations that use the facilities.
Okay.
And I will say, just on that note, that our fees tend to run a little bit low relative to our peer districts. So via facilities committee, expect that to be coming before you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, Bill and I were talking today. Do you want to just talk about the software a little bit, or do you want to?
Yeah, certainly. So I will be briefing the board with a memo about a financial projection software that I intend to purchase for my office. It's called White Birch. It's offered by PFM through a partnership with PFM. White Birch originated in the higher ed space as a projection model. I shared it with the cabinet a few weeks ago, and what I like about it is that it's an interactive software, so it will have historical data, and it will also be able to project out based on assumptions that we can collectively put into the software. But it will also, I can sit with the device, and if I make a change to the real estate tax rate or to the growth in earned income tax or salary increases or appeasers rates, it will automatically change. So if you imagine a graph of revenue and expenditures, it will automatically change the lines. The second aspect that I really like about it, particularly for Council Rock, is that it has the ability to model different scenarios and incorporate them on top of what you might consider your general operating budget. So a couple examples. If we wanted to model out different options under MDIT funding, one through the general budget, one through capital, we could add that as a scenario and then build it on top so that we could see what the impact was and the change from baseline. All our capital projects, we could move timing around and be able to see what the impact would be. And then just sort of at a more basic level, if we wanted to change the healthcare rate from 5% to 6%, you could see operationally what might happen. So as we talk about the thing most pressing on my mind that would apply here would be discussing high school block scheduling and be able to incorporate the different scenarios and be able to see what the budgetary impact
Did you use this software in your previous district?
for 1 month.
It's very impressive.
It's very exciting.
It is.
It really is, and it's something that I think is way past due.
Yep.
We've done the
Oh,
5-year projections on a spreadsheet, which was leaps and bounds what we were doing the
Sure.
first couple of years. So that is really great. I'm really excited to see this work, and we talked about maybe some other options that might be available in there. In that discussion, I've talked to everybody now with Marianne walking out, but we have some potential challenges going forward with the funding of our programs in the district and keeping up with our expenses, just where they are, not even including looking at things that seem really great, like block scheduling. So what I'd like to talk about is looking at potentially putting together a group of community volunteers to help us look at the budget and our finances in some kind of task force. I've talked to everybody. I've heard a lot of support and some concerns. And what I think would be the best move forward to begin is to have a small subgroup of this board to work with Robert and Bill to set goals, identify who those volunteers might be and where they're from, how we're going to ask for those volunteers, all the parameters around that, how long we'll serve for, the number of people involved, how recommendations will take place, and all of that. So if there's no objection to that going forward, I'll ask if anybody would like to be, I'll volunteer myself on that. Andy raised his hand. Let's do this. Why don't you just let me know and let Robert and Bill know, and then we'll get together a small group. Okay. Is that good? Everybody good with that? Yep. Okay.
And Mark, I'll say thank you for that. I think Bill will as well. We're both 100% on board with the
I
concept.
appreciate that.
Because, certainly we recognize, and we have for the past 3 years, we're coming off 3 consecutive Act 1 tax increases. And, we need a model that's sustainable, that's great for kids, also parents and taxpayers. And we've got a ton of smart people out there in the community. You said that to me on the phone today, and I couldn't agree more. So we are all on board.
All right, so we'll work on getting something together as fast as possible. We'll identify I think no more than 3, right? 3 of us? Anybody disagree with that? And I think that's easier to coordinate. It's more to coordinate schedules than anything. So we'll move forward on that as quickly as possible. Okay?
Thanks.
All right. Any other public comment? Would you like to ask questions or give comment before we adjourn?
Actually, I'm kind of curious about possibly. It's like, many of my teachers are kind of like concerned that it will take a lot of time away from classes, like by a lot.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, we're in the process of studying all that. So with any kind of change, there's good to it, and there's also some not so good to it. So the really good thing about this is right now, high school student only gets to take 6 classes. So now we would have the opportunity to take 8 classes. But we're not going to extend the school day. So therefore, each class period gets shrunk down a little bit. And the idea is to have, basically a 90 or so minute class, 4 of them on one day, and then the next day have 4 other 90-minute classes. So part of the, all that we're thinking about and studying and analyzing is the instructional minutes piece. So we understand how many minutes we have now. We understand how many minutes we would have. We're looking at those same number of minutes in a whole bunch of high schools around us, high achieving high schools around us, and we'll be reporting back on that to teachers and to the community and certainly to the school board as well. So we're a long way from making a decision on that, just so you know.
And I think you also said like it could vary for classes. Well, not quite sure how it.
Yeah, what I would tell you is a couple of things. So a conventional block schedule also has 4 periods in a day, about 90 minutes. And so a student takes those 4 classes for the first semester, and then a different set of 4 classes for the second semester. It's that model that really worries me from an AP standpoint, because that first semester ends 3rd week of January. You don't take the test until May, and that gap in time just isn't good. Likewise, second semester, you really only have class from the 3rd week of January until maybe the 2nd week of May. So that's a pretty compressed period of time as well. So that's one piece of it. The other piece that I'll tell you is that we are really high in Council Rock right now with the number of minutes that each class has. So I don't think there's another school around that has as many minutes as what we do. So again, the look that we're doing is saying, all these different high achieving schools with AP and otherwise, how many instructional minutes do you offer for each class? And what we're seeing so far anyway is that what we're looking at, what we're proposing, what we're studying kind of falls right in the middle. It's not way low, but it's also not way high, which is where we're at right now. Great questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments from the board? Anybody else? Okay, hearing nothing else, meeting adjourned.